It started with a laugh. Not the kind of laugh that fills a room with warmth, but the kind that feels like a warning. A sharp, brittle sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. We were at dinner, just another Friday night with our closest friends. James and Anna, Zach and Emily, and of course, Sam. My wife. The woman who'd spent the last hour nursing her third glass of wine, her cheeks flushed, her words just a little too loose. I should have known something was off. But I didn't. Not then. Sam leaned back in her chair, her wine glass dangling precariously from her fingers. You know, she began, her voice lilting with a playful edge. We've all known each other for years. We've shared holidays, birthdays, even secrets. But let's be honest, dinner conversations can get a little predictable. Why don't we spice things up? Let's talk about something real. Something raw. The table fell silent. I forced a laugh, trying to lighten the mood. All right, Sam, I think that's enough wine for you. But she ignored me. No, let's be honest here, she continued, swirling the last of her red wine like she was about to deliver some grand revelation. I mean, come on, we all know the real reason Andy's been so stressed lately. It's because our bedroom has been a little boring. A nervous chuckle rippled around the table, but no one met my eyes. Sam, I said quietly, stop. She didn't. You guys ever feel like something is just missing, she went on, looking around the table like she was posing a philosophical question. Like, you love your partner, but sometimes you just need more? My hands clenched under the table. The tension in the room was thick now, a silent pressure that made my pulse hammer in my ears. Jesus, Sam, Emily muttered, shifting uncomfortably in her seat. But Sam just smiled, like this was all some joke I should be in on. Look, it's not a big deal, she said, rolling her eyes. We're all friends here. And I mean, let's be honest. Men have their limitations, right? Her words felt like a slap. I glanced around the table. James wouldn't look at me. Anna bit her lip. Emily looked mortified. And then there was Zach. He didn't look uncomfortable. He didn't fidget in his seat. He didn't shift his gaze away like the others. No. Zach just smirked. Like he already knew the punchline. Like he was enjoying the show. A slow realization began to creep over me, chilling my blood. And that's when I knew, this wasn't just drunken rambling. This was something else. Something much worse. I should have said something. I should have shut it down right then and there, called her out, made her explain herself in front of everyone. But I didn't. Because I was too busy watching Zach. That smirk. That knowing smirk. It was subtle, barely there, but I saw it. And it hit me like a gut punch. Sam was still laughing, still playing it off like it was some joke, but my mind was already spinning, piecing together things I hadn't even realized I'd noticed before. The extra time she'd been spending on her phone. The sudden change in her schedule. The way she always seemed to have some excuse to stay out late. And now, Zach. The air in the room had changed. It wasn't just me, everyone felt it. The laughter had faded, the atmosphere thick with something uneasy. No one was looking at me. No one was looking at Sam either. But I could feel their thoughts hanging in the silence. James cleared his throat, forcing a smile. So, Andy, what's your take? Do you think something's missing? A test. A way to defuse the moment. I could have laughed it off. I could have played along, shrugged and made some self-deprecating joke, let the night move on. But I didn't feel like playing along anymore. I turned to Sam, meeting her wine-glazed eyes with a steady gaze. Why don't you answer that, Sam? I said, keeping my voice even. Since you're so eager to talk about our private life in front of everyone. That wiped the grin off her face. Jesus, Andy, she muttered, shaking her head. Relax. It was just a joke. Was it? She sighed, setting her glass down a little too hard. Oh, come on. It's not like I meant anything by it. Zach took a sip of his drink, watching the exchange like he was enjoying it. I was done ignoring it. Since we're being honest here, I said, my pulse pounding, why don't we talk about where you really were last Thursday night? The words hit the table like a gunshot. Sam stiffened. James and Anna exchanged a glance. Emily shifted in her chair. And Zach. Zach didn't smirk this time. He went still. Bingo. Sam forced a laugh, but I could see the tension in her shoulders now. I already told you, she said carefully. I was out with the girls. Yeah. I leaned forward. Funny thing about that. I ran into Anna earlier today. She mentioned that you canceled on them at the last minute. Silence. Sam's lips parted, just slightly, like she was about to say something, like she was scrambling for an excuse, but nothing came out. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Zach swallow. Just a little too hard. I knew that look. I knew exactly what that look meant. Something inside me snapped into place. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't me overthinking. This was real. I straightened, exhaling slowly. Huh. That's weird, isn't it? I said, keeping my tone light, too light. I mean, you said you were out with the girls, but the girls say you weren't. So that makes me wonder. Sam's jaw clenched. Andy. I cut her off. Where the hell were you? The table was silent. The tension was suffocating now, pressing against every single person in the room. Sam opened her mouth. Closed it. Then, from across the table, Zach did the one thing he absolutely shouldn't have done. He cleared his throat. It was quiet. Barely noticeable. But in that moment, it was everything. Because that's when I knew. I knew. And judging by the look on Sam's face, she knew I knew too. The room was dead silent. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then slowly, I leaned back in my chair, looking Zach dead in the eye. And I smiled. Something missing, huh? I murmured. His face drained of color. And that's when the real game began. I never expected Zach to crack first. I thought it would be Sam. I thought she'd scramble for a lie, laugh it off, try to spin some excuse that sounded halfway believable. But she didn't. Because Zach was already falling apart. His hand tightened around his glass. His jaw clenched just a little too hard. He wasn't smirking anymore. He wasn't leaning back in his chair like this was just another casual dinner. No, he was stiff, uncomfortable, and avoiding my eyes. Guilty. The tension in the room was unbearable. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen, the faint hum of the fridge, the distant sound of a car passing outside. Then Sam finally spoke. Andy, she said quietly, her voice tight. Can we not do this here? And just like that, the room shifted. Not can we not do this, as in, what are you talking about? Or stop making things up. No, her voice had a different weight to it. A resignation. Like she wasn't denying anything. Like she just didn't want to deal with it right now. A cold wave of realization washed over me. I sat back in my chair, crossing my arms. Why not, Sam? I asked, keeping my voice even. We're all friends here. Isn't that what you said? Sam's eyes darted to Zach. Just a flicker. Barely a second. But it was enough. Emily noticed it too. She turned to Zach, eyes narrowing. Zach, she said, her voice sharp, controlled. What's going on? Zach exhaled sharply, setting his glass down with just a little too much force. Nothing, he muttered. A muscle in his jaw twitched. Nothing. I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. Then why do you look like you're about to pass out? Sam shot me a warning glance, but I wasn't letting this go. Not now. Not when I was this close to the truth. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. Tell me, Zach, I said. Since Sam seems to think something's missing in our marriage, you wouldn't happen to know what that is, would you? Zach's eyes flickered to Sam again. Wrong move. Emily saw it. James saw it. Hell, at this point, even Anna saw it. Emily's face paled. "Oh my God," she breathed. That's when I knew I wasn't the only one figuring it out in real time. Zach wasn't just my friend. He was Emily's husband. And the way she was looking at him now, it was like she was seeing him for the first time. "Zach," Emily said, her voice lower now, shaking. "Look at me." He didn't. That was answer enough. Emily's chair scraped against the floor as she pushed back from the table. She stood slowly, like she was afraid that if she moved too fast, she'd lose whatever shred of composure she had left. Her hands clenched at her sides. "You son of a bitch," she whispered. That was when she turned to me. "And you," she said, her voice shaking. "How long have you known?" I exhaled. "Not long," I admitted. Sam stiffened. Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" I looked straight at my wife, watching as she started to shrink under my gaze. 2 days ago, a guy from work, Chris, called me out of the blue, I said. He told me he thought he saw Sam and Zach at a cafe on the other side of town. Said they looked close. Like more than just friends. Zach inhaled sharply. His fingers curled into fists. Sam's face drained of color. I told myself Chris was probably mistaken, I continued. But something didn't sit right with me. So I started thinking. And I remembered last week, when Sam told me she was having a girls' night with Emily and Anna. I turned to Anna. But then today, when I ran into you, you told me Sam canceled last minute. Anna's face darkened. That was when I saw real fear flash in Sam's eyes. And that's when I suspected something, I said, leaning back. I was going to check my suspicions, dig into it a little more, maybe even follow Sam next time she went out. I let that sink in. Then I smiled. "But you know what, babe?" I said, keeping my tone light, almost amused. "You saved me the trouble." Sam's lips parted, her breath shaky. "You were so eager to embarrass me tonight," I said, voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "that you didn't even realize you just handed me exactly what I needed." The color drained from her face completely. And Zach. Zach looked like he wanted to disappear. Emily turned back to him, her voice sharp. "Is it true?" Zach swallowed. "Emily, She slapped him. Hard. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Everyone flinched. Zach sat there, stunned, a red mark blooming across his cheek. And for the first time that night, Sam looked genuinely afraid. Emily turned to her, fury burning behind her eyes. "You," she spat. "You were sleeping with my husband?" Sam opened her mouth. Closed it. She had no excuse. No witty comeback. No drunken joke to smooth it over. Because there was nothing she could say that would fix this. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Then Zach did the one thing he absolutely shouldn't have done. He stood up, too fast, too aggressive, and reached for Emily's arm. "Don't touch me," she snapped, yanking away. Then she turned to me. Her voice was shaking now. "So what are you going to do?" I didn't hesitate. I turned to Zach first. "You need to leave." He hesitated, like he was going to argue. So I stepped forward. Just enough to let him know that if he didn't walk out on his own, I'd make him. He must have seen something in my expression, because his mouth clamped shut. Without another word, he grabbed his jacket and stormed out. Emily didn't follow him. She turned to Sam instead. "You make me sick," she whispered. Then she grabbed her purse and walked out too. James and Anna exchanged a look, then quietly excused themselves. And just like that, the dinner was over. The front door clicked shut behind them, leaving only silence. Just me. And Sam. I turned to her. She was still sitting at the table, staring at the half-empty bottle of wine like she wished she could rewind the entire night. Her hands trembled. For the first time, she looked small. Like she knew she had just lost everything. I let the silence stretch between us. Let her feel the weight of it. Then, finally, I spoke. "Pack your shit," I said, my voice cold. "You're leaving tonight." Her lip trembled. "Andy, please." I shook my head. "We're done." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. Not anymore. Not after this. I turned and walked away, leaving her sitting there, alone, drowning in the mess she'd made. But as I reached the stairs, one last thought crossed my mind, one final sickening realization that sent a chill down my spine. Zach had left. Emily had left. James and Anna had left. And yet, Sam was still here. Why? Why? I turned back, my voice quiet, deadly. "You didn't just sleep with him, did you?" She froze. Didn't answer. Which was an answer in itself. And just like that, I knew. Zach wasn't the only one. This went deeper. Much, much deeper. And I had barely scratched the surface. I stood at the foot of the stairs, my mind racing. I had just asked her the question. The one I already knew the answer to. "You didn't just sleep with him, did you?" She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The way she froze, the way her breath hitched just slightly, she may as well have screamed the truth. It wasn't just Zach. There were others. A sick, heavy feeling settled in my chest. I exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over my face, forcing myself to stay calm. I needed to think. I turned away from her and walked into the kitchen. My body felt like it was moving on autopilot. I opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and twisted the cap off with more force than necessary. The cold liquid did nothing to clear the fog in my head. I needed to get out of here. I needed a plan. The house was too quiet now, too still. A sharp contrast from the chaos of just minutes ago. The dining table was still a mess. Plates half full, glasses smeared with fingerprints, the bottle of wine Sam had been drinking from standing there like a monument to the disaster that had just unfolded. I turned around. She was still sitting in the dining room, her head in her hands. Her whole body was hunched over, like she was collapsing in on herself. For the first time tonight, she actually looked small. Not powerful. Not smug. Not untouchable. Just defeated. But I wasn't about to feel sorry for her. She did this. And I wasn't going to let her drag me down with her. I cleared my throat. "I'm filing for divorce." She flinched. Slowly, she lifted her head, her eyes rimmed with red. "Andy," she started, her voice shaky. "Don't say that. Please." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Don't say that? Sam, do you even realize what you've done?" Tears welled in her eyes, but I wasn't about to fall for that. Not after tonight. "I made a mistake," she whispered. That was it. That was all she could come up with. A mistake. Like this was just some accident. Like she'd tripped and fallen into bed with my best friend. Like she hadn't been lying to my face for months. Maybe even years. I clenched my jaw, shaking my head. "No, Sam. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. A mistake is leaving the stove on." I stepped forward, my voice colder now. This was a choice. Over and over again, you chose this. Her hands gripped the edge of the table like she was trying to steady herself. "Andy, please. We can fix this. Fix this." I almost laughed again. "Fix what, Sam?" I snapped. "The fact that you humiliated me in front of all our friends? The fact that you've been sneaking around behind my back, lying to me? Or should we start with the fact that I know Zach wasn't the only one?" She paled. I took a slow step closer. "How many, Sam?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "How many times have you done this?" She looked away. It doesn't matter." I exhaled sharply, a bitter smile forming on my lips. "That's your answer?" She wiped at her face, suddenly angry. "What do you want me to say, Andy? Do you want a number? Do you want details? Will that somehow make you feel better? I shook my head. No, Sam. Nothing about this will ever make me feel better. I turned away from her, gripping the edge of the counter, staring down at the granite like it might give me answers. Divorce. That was the only path forward. It wasn't even a question. I had spent years building a life with this woman. Years believing she was my partner, my best friend, the person I could trust above all else. And now, I didn't even recognize her. I glanced around the kitchen, my eyes landing on the small framed photo by the coffee maker. It was from our honeymoon. We were standing on a beach, sun-kissed and happy, frozen in time in a moment that now felt like a cruel joke. I turned away from it, disgust curling in my stomach. I had to get out of here. I had to start over. Sam must have sensed something shift in me because she stood up, stepping closer. Andy, can we just talk? Please. I let out a slow breath. There's nothing left to say. Her lip trembled. You don't mean that. I met her gaze, my voice calm, steady. I do. A tear slipped down her cheek. Where are you going? I grabbed my jacket from the chair, slipping it on. I don't know. But I'm not staying here. Her face crumpled, but I didn't feel anything anymore. No anger. No sadness. Just emptiness. She reached for me then, her fingers brushing my arm. A last-ditch effort. I stepped back. Her hand hovered in the air for a second before falling to her side. She knew. She knew she had lost me. I walked to the front door, grabbed my keys, and turned back one last time. I'll have a lawyer contact you. She opened her mouth, but I didn't wait for a response. I stepped outside, shutting the door behind me. And just like that, our marriage was over. Or at least it should have been. But as I got into my car, gripping the steering wheel, that sinking feeling came back. The feeling that there was still something I didn't know. That this wasn't over yet. And that whatever truth was still buried. It was going to be worse than I ever imagined. I didn't sleep that night. After I walked out, I drove. No destination, no plan. Just miles of empty roads stretching ahead of me, the hum of the tires beneath me, and the quiet weight of everything sinking in. The betrayal. The humiliation. The years of my life wasted on someone who was never who I thought she was. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, forcing myself to breathe. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it was different now. It wasn't the kind that burned wild and uncontrollable. No, this was colder, sharper, more focused. By morning, I knew exactly what I had to do. I wasn't going to let her, or this, define me. I wasn't going to drown in the wreckage. I was going to rebuild. The first thing I did was call my lawyer. I met with him that afternoon in a sterile office that smelled like paper and coffee. He asked me how I wanted to proceed. Fast, I said. I want this over with as soon as possible. He nodded. Given the evidence of infidelity, you'll have the upper hand in the divorce. You'll keep the house, the assets, and if it comes to it, custody of the kids. That last part hit me hard. The kids. They were at my parents' house for the weekend, thankfully spared from the chaos of the night before. But they would have to know. Sooner or later, they would have to know. I exhaled. She can fight if she wants, but I'm not backing down. This marriage is over. He nodded. We'll get the paperwork started. It was official. The next chapter of my life had begun. Going back to the house was the hardest part. Walking through that door and knowing that everything in it, every piece of furniture, every picture on the wall, was just a reminder of a life that no longer existed. But I refused to let it break me. I started small. I took the wedding photos off the walls, packed them into a box and shoved them into the back of the closet where they couldn't taunt me. Then I tackled the bedroom. Her clothes. Her perfume bottles. The little notes she used to leave on my nightstand. Notes that now felt like cruel jokes. I put it all in a bag, every last trace of her, and left it by the door. She could come get it when she was ready. I wasn't keeping anything of hers in my home. My home. It felt different now. For the first time in a long time, it actually felt like mine. I won't lie and say it was easy. The pain came in waves. Some days, it felt like I was drowning in it. The betrayal, the lies, the sheer weight of what I'd lost. It was suffocating. But then there were other days. Days where the air felt lighter. Days where I could sit on the back porch with a cup of coffee and realize that I wasn't just surviving. I was living. The kids helped. They didn't know all the details, just that Mom and Dad weren't together anymore. There were questions, of course. Tears. Confusion. But I made them a promise that no matter what, I would be there. That our home was still home, even if things had changed. And slowly, things did change. Mornings became peaceful. I woke up early, made breakfast, took the kids to school, and found comfort in the routine. Work became an escape. A place where I wasn't Andy, the guy whose wife cheated, but just Andy. The guy who was good at his job. The guy who had his shit together. And every night, when I tucked my kids into bed and kissed them goodnight, I reminded myself that I was doing this for them. For me. For the life I deserved. One evening, a few months later, I stood in the living room, looking around at the space I had reclaimed. The walls weren't bare anymore. There were new photos, ones of me and the kids, ones that didn't have to share space with memories of a past I had left behind. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt real. It felt like mine. As I stood there, I thought about everything that had led me here. The betrayal. The pain. The nights where I thought I'd never get past it. And yet, here I was. Still standing. Still moving forward. Still me. I exhaled, a quiet, steady breath. Samantha's lies may have shaken me, but they didn't break me. And they never would.